All right, so, we love to dig into these listener research requests. And this one, wow, this one's a doozy.
Yeah, definitely piqued my curiosity.
Barrick Gold, huh? Talk about a deep dive.
Absolutely, into the heart of the gold market.
You sent in some, well, frankly, kind of mind-blowing research on them.
I glanced through it, definitely raises some eyebrows.
The big question is their stock actually genuinely undervalued.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right, because, okay, get this. We're potentially talking about a company whose assets, the stuff they own outright, might be worth more than its entire market value.
That's what caught my eye, too. That kind of discrepancy always makes you wonder, what's the market missing?
It's like finding out your grandma's antique collection is actually full of priceless treasures, you know? So, before we get too deep, what's the headline here? What makes Barrick Gold so fascinating to you from an expert perspective?
It's the disconnect, honestly. You've got this potential intrinsic value, which is what all those assets are actually worth based on, tangible stuff, gold reserves, mines, projects. And then you've got how the market's valuing the company right now. And those two numbers, they're not exactly playing nice.
Yeah, and you'd think with a company like Barrick, a major player in the gold mining industry, the market would have a pretty good handle on their value, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But that's what makes this deep dive so compelling. So let's unpack it, shall we? Let's start with their crown jewel, so to speak. You highlighted this in your research, their stake in Nevada gold mines. Just how big of a deal is this for them?
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't memorized our listeners' research, totally understandable, by the way, Nevada gold mines is kind of a big deal because we're talking about roughly half of all the gold mined in Nevada coming from this one venture.
Not just roughly, actually. It's the single largest gold-producing complex on the planet, I believe. And Barrick owns, what is it, a 61.5% stake?
Yeah, 61.5%. So essentially, they own a majority of this gold-producing behemoth. And that's just their gold holdings there. We haven't even touched on their copper assets yet.
Which are significant in their own right. And that's precisely where this starts to get really interesting. See, analysts estimate that just Barrick's share of the gold and copper in Nevada gold mines, just that chunk, is worth something in the ballpark of $40 billion.
Okay, let me write this down because I need to wrap my head around this. $40 billion. And Barrick's current market cap is?
Around $35 billion, give or take. You see the issue?
Hold on. So just their piece of Nevada gold mines, one part of their portfolio, is potentially worth more than the entire company's valuation on the market right now.
That's the math, yeah. Which begs the question, what about everything else they own?
Right. It's like the market's saying, yeah, Nevada gold mines, that's great, but everything else you've got, we're not so sure.
In a nutshell, that's a very simplified way to put it. The market, for whatever reason, is essentially assigning a negative value to Barrick's other assets. And these aren't exactly small potatoes we're talking about here.
No, not at all. I mean, we're talking about 3 Tier 1 gold mines. And just for our listeners who might not be familiar, these are the real deal, massive, high-quality gold deposits that are expected to keep producing for decades. Decades.
Exactly. These are long-term cash-generating assets that, by all accounts, should be adding substantial value to the company.
Right.
And it's not just these existing mines either. Barrick also has this pipeline of other really promising projects.
Right, like Lumwana and Reko Diq.
Exactly. Lumwana in Zambia is already a significant copper producer, and they're working on expanding it even further. Then there's Reko Diq in Pakistan. This one has the potential to be a major copper and gold mine, like world-class potential. And both of these are slated to bring a hefty boost to their production in the coming years. We're talking serious increases in their gold and copper output.
So we've got potentially undervalued assets. We've got growth on the horizon. This is already painting a pretty compelling picture for Barrick, wouldn't you say? But we can't forget about one crucial piece of the puzzle, their management team. Because what good is all this potential if the people at the helm aren't making smart decisions, right?
100%. A company is only as good as its leadership, after all. And that's another area where Barrick seems to stand out, at least on paper. They've got this track record of being, shall we say, shareholder-friendly.
Yeah, you definitely picked up on that in your research. They haven't been shy about returning value to their shareholders, that's for sure.
Right. Over the past few years, they've been consistently paying dividends, which is always a plus. And then there's the buybacks. They've bought back over $3 billion, yes, billion, of their own stock.
Which, for anyone who might not be familiar, essentially means they're betting on themselves, right? They're saying, we think our stock is undervalued, so we're buying it back.
Precisely. And on top of all that, they've been really focused on improving their operational efficiency. streamlining processes, cutting unnecessary costs, all that good stuff.
Which, at the end of the day, means a healthier bottom line and more potential profits for investors.
Exactly. They're not just sitting on a pile of gold. They're actively trying to, polish it up, make it bigger, and more importantly, make it more valuable.
All right, so we've got potentially undervalued assets, promising growth prospects, a management team that seems to know what they're doing. This all sounds almost too good to be true. So before we start digging for those shovels, let's talk about the catch, because there's always a catch, right? What are some of the risks or potential downsides investors should be aware of with Barrick?
Right, because the market doesn't just hand out free money no matter how good a company might look on paper. And with Barrick, it's essential to remember that they're operating in a volatile space.
Commodities, right? Gold and copper prices, they can swing up and down like nobody's business.
Exactly. And those price swings can have a huge impact on a mining company's bottom line. If the price of gold or copper takes a nosedive, that directly eats into their profits, even if they're running a tight ship operationally.
And let's not forget the global economic roller coaster we've been on lately.
Exactly. Geopolitical uncertainty, inflation, interest rates, all these things can impact investor sentiment and ultimately affect how the market values a company like Barrick, even if their underlying business remains solid.
And let's not forget, mining itself is an inherently risky business.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got environmental regulations, safety concerns, political instability in some of the regions where they operate. These are all factors that could potentially disrupt their operations and impact their profitability.
So even though Barrick seems to check a lot of boxes, that potential undervaluation, those exciting growth prospects, and a management team that seems to be prioritizing shareholder value, it's crucial to go in with your eyes wide open.
Precisely.
Do your own research, consider those risks, and make sure it aligns with your personal investment goals and risk tolerance.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So to wrap up this deep dive on Barrick Gold, it seems like we've got a bit of a head-scratcher. On the one hand, you've got this potential case for undervaluation, some compelling arguments for why they might be worth significantly more than their current market price.
And don't forget those exciting growth opportunities.
Right. But then on the other hand, as with any investment, there are always risks to consider.
Volatility in commodity prices, global economic uncertainty, and the inherent risks of the mining industry itself.
So, for all of you eager investors out there, and I know you're out there, here's something to chew on. If Barrick is so potentially undervalued, what is the market missing? Is it something about their existing assets, their growth prospects? Maybe it's even just underestimating the management team's ability to execute their strategy and deliver shareholder value? Or is it something else entirely? That's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. The answer is, well, they're out there. You just have to know where to look.
Happy digging.